They didn't need physical evidence. They didn't need DNA. All they needed was their God-given common sense, the ability to tell the difference between the truth and a lie. This week, finally, a verdict in the Drew Peterson murder trial. Welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. He said he could kill her and make it look like an accident. Well, he was dead wrong. Justice held his feet to the fire, calling out a judge who wanted to settle a political score at the expense of a victim. Well, that didn't happen. Some even gave us credit.
I think if there was one juror who was a holdout, which is the basis of that question, which one do you think it was?
We don't know if there's a holdout.
Whichever one watches Fox News.
This week, 12 people from all walks of life in the small town of Joliet, Illinois, reaffirmed our faith in the criminal justice system, a faith shaken by verdicts like Casey Anthony's. The CSI mentality of television and quick fixes couldn't compare to the centuries-old argument of motive, means, and opportunity. And in spite of the fractured and whittled down evidence that Judge Burmilla created, this jury connected the dots. And make no mistake, circumstantial evidence is powerful. It's been used in this country to get convictions for 200 years. It has no motive to lie, no family members, no poor eyesight, no bias, and no hostility. It speaks for itself. The wheels of justice are not always swift. They move slowly. They always have. Sometimes they needed a little grease, sometimes a push, sometimes even a fourth wife gone missing. With us tonight is one of the 12 jurors who helped move the wheels of justice in the Drew Peterson case, juror Ron Sapalo. Ron, thanks so much for being with us this evening. How are you?
Good, Judge. Good to see you again.
And we have looked at each other for many weeks in that courtroom, and I was always wondering what you were thinking, and I finally got the chance to ask you. You sat through this trial. You were the one juror who held out. Why?
Well, I have, that's a good question. It came down to 11-1, and it just happened to be that I was the holdout juror. I guess I'm going to be known for that for a while now. And I just had some questions about the hearsay evidence and the circumstantial evidence. And I had some questions as to the constitutionality of the Illinois hearsay law. And I just felt uncomfortable with that hearsay evidence. And that's why I held out for an extra day.
Well, you know, what's interesting is that when the question came back from the jury to the judge, what does unanimous mean? Was there a thought for any time that you would not change your verdict? I mean, what made you finally change?
Well, I had to reread the instructions from the judge on the hearsay evidence and the circumstantial evidence. I kept reading it, and then, of course, the general indictment itself, trying to find out if using the evidence presented in court, did the state satisfy the burden of proof that the defendant was guilty in this situation.
Ron, was there, and let's go to the whole jury now, was there any question regarding whether this was an accident or a homicide? Was this something you guys decided early on?
Oh, yes. Pretty much, we pretty much did not even talk about the defense expert witness because we thought there were too many bruises in the front and back. So the victim would have to have fallen down at least 2 different times and pretty badly to get hurt with that many bruises, first to the front and then to the back.
And, you know, it's interesting, all of the argument between the attorneys, and I think there were at least 6 expert witnesses. And did you guys discuss the fact that the bruises, the injuries in the front were bruises, but the injuries in the back were abrasions? Was there any discussion about that?
No, not really. we knew that they were all injuries. When it comes to medical testimony, at least for me, it's pretty much Greek. I mean, she had many injuries to the front and back, and what you called them exactly was, at least to me, irrelevant.
Okay. What about the most significant witnesses in the trial? Who were the most effective witnesses according to the jury?
Well, the hearsay witnesses, Reverend Shorey and the Harry Smith. And the reason for that is because it was very compelling. Some of the jurors, including myself, had some problems placing the defendant at the scene on that weekend. And that hearsay evidence convinced eventually all 4 jurors that thought he was not guilty at first that he was at least at the scene and thus guilty.
All right, a couple more questions. Did you guys think that it was at all unusual, Drew Peterson's behavior in the courtroom, the behavior of the attorneys? I mean, did you think that it was less than somber, less than you would have expected in a murder trial?
You mean, were they not taking their job seriously?
Well, how did it hit you?
I thought the defense team looked confident, having a good time, not overconfident, at least not that I could see. I could definitely see that they were confident, and they were. I never saw anything unprofessional in their behavior.
Okay.
So
let me ask you this, Ron. Final question. Going into this as a juror, did you have any sense that it would be as profound an experience and as difficult or, you know, easy a decision, whatever it might have been for you?
So in other words, was it what I expected?
Exactly.
It was, well, I asked the sheriff, and he said between 4 to 6 weeks for a murder trial, and that was about right. And,
but you found someone guilty of murder. It's a tough call, isn't it?
Yes, very much so.
All right. Ron Sapalo, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we appreciate your service as well. And up next, a Justice exclusive, the man who took on the thug, Drew Peterson, and won.
It's a dark day in America when you can convict somebody on hearsay evidence.
It is.
A very dark day in America when you let this in. Who knows what the next victim of this hearsay is going to be and who it's going to be?
Next victim? The defense continues to mix up the defendant and the victim. The victim is not the victim of hearsay. The victim is the victim of the crime. But my next guest has reaffirmed our faith in the criminal justice system when he won a case against all odds. Prosecutor James Glasgow, known as the state's attorney for Will County. Thanks so much for being with us this evening.
My pleasure, Judge.
We really appreciate it. It's an exclusive for us. But I guess the first question to ask you is, you were relentless in your efforts to indict and convict Drew Peterson. Why?
Well, when he went on his public caravan on national television, I guess it's worldwide television, and basically mocked violence against women, domestic violence, and just taunted law enforcement. I took it as a challenge, and also I've been working for 20 years battling domestic violence, and people like this just cannot be allowed to continue. And we obviously had to have the evidence, so we started working a grand jury, and that went on for, I think, a couple of years. There were a number of amazing things that happened throughout the process. We were able to get legislation passed to, create a statutory rule. Yeah,
but Jim, let's talk about that. You know, so many people think that hearsay is not real evidence. I mean, from the time of the common law, it is evidence. Yes. I mean, and you really didn't need that law. It's in the common law.
Yes, it was in the common law, but in our particular state, it was difficult to convince judges based on the case law. So we had to have a statute.
So what you're saying is there are judges who need to see something in a statute before they understand that they can use it.
And even when we got the statute passed, they were questioning it. And there was a lot of criticism from the media, the liberal media. And it was funny, when the Supreme Court finally affirmed everything I was doing, they went, oh, maybe he's right. And they did a 180. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, you're adamant one way, now you're adamant the other. What good is your opinion? And again, when you're being criticized by law school professors who never stepped foot in the courtroom, it's kind of comical.
Well, and you know, it wasn't just before the indictment and during the investigation. It was during the trial. I was there, Jim. It was a beat down of the prosecution every day. So when I say against all odds, it's not just almost a perfect crime, but what it was a judge who beat you down constantly. And I know you're going before him again, but were there days when you just wanted to say, this is crazy?
Well, you know, there were a number of rulings that were very difficult. The first week, there seemed to be something in the air that maybe the victory I had with the appellate court allowing certain statements in was going to be reversed at the trial court level. And you know, I had one of my assistants was up arguing, and it wasn't going anywhere. And I got up and I stood behind her, waiting for my turn, and then I just let loose with 5 years of frustration, arguing the law, and then the judge ruled our way. Yeah. And then that was the turning point for me in the case. And then we never lost focus after that. Well,
you know, as someone who watched, I don't think you ever lost focus. But the question that everyone is asking now, what's going to happen with the Stacey Peterson case, the fourth wife, missing since October of 2007?
Yes. Well, we had a hearing in 2010. And one of the things we had to prove at that hearing is that Drew Peterson killed both Kathleen Savio and Stacey Peterson by a preponderance of the evidence. And that's what Judge White found. Some reporters came away from that saying they thought we had a pretty good case with regards to Stacey Peterson. So we're going to go back and review that, and not just because the reporters said so, but whenever you don't have a body, Judge, you know it can be difficult. And Stacey's been missing for 5 years now. And in this electronic society we live in, it's almost impossible for 5 years to not have any
But is there
contact.
a time period in the state of Illinois after which it can be presumed that someone is dead? Is it 7 years in some states?
Yes, but you know, again, for the criminal case, that would be not.
It's not necessary.
Yeah, well, no, but that wouldn't necessarily be binding on anyone, and we have to convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt that she's dead.
Of course.
Okay,
of course.
and that he killed her.
Of course. November 26th, the sentence. He can get anywhere from 20 to 60 years. What will you ask for? I'm
going to ask for 60 years without hesitation. He was a police officer. He used his badge to commit this crime. If you think about it, the next night when he alleges that he was knocking on the door trying to return the kids, he's in uniform. He's concealing a homicide. Because he's a policeman, he's committing official misconduct. And hopefully the pension board will take notice of that, because I understand that, you know, because he committed the murder while he was off duty, that may not be sufficient to terminate his pension.
But doesn't the statute say that if he used, I don't know, evidence or what he learned as a police officer in the course of his business, that could be used to take away the pension?
Again, I'm not an expert on pension law, but it's difficult unless it's done in the course of your employment. So, you know, some people would argue.
But what about the hitman? Wasn't he employed and in a police car with his gun when he tried to hire a hitman?
That's a good
point. To kill Kathleen.
That's a good point, but he was never. Yeah, that was never charged, and again, that was admitted as to his intent only in our trial. But I think it was powerful evidence.
Real quickly, will this withstand an appeal?
Absolutely.
You're not worried?
No, we did a lot. I flew to Washington, D.C. and watched the argument in Giles versus California, where Anton Scalia, one of the most conservative justices, laid it out. He basically is a strict constructionist. If the concept wasn't around when the framers did the Constitution, he won't buy it. So that's why the 400 years is really important. But also, he's the Crawford case, where you confront your witnesses. He's one of the biggest proponents.
And he was okay.
And he's 100%. It's an equitable forfeiture. especially in this case, if you murder the witness, you can't go in and laugh at the judge and say, ha ha, you can't prove your case now.
Well, I have to tell you, State's Attorney James Glasgow, you have reaffirmed our faith in the criminal justice system. You fought for battered women. You heard the cheers when you came out of that courthouse. Those cheers, though, were all over the country. I want to thank you on behalf of all of us and all of the victims' advocates in this country.
Thanks
you, Judge. So much, and thanks for being with us. And the jury that convicted Drew Peterson did so because of two people. We heard from one last week, Harry Smith. The other is with us after the break.
I hear the train a-comin', it's rolling around the bend, and I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, well I know I had it coming, I know I can't be free.